The yard that never sees the sun. Subscribe if you're brave, like if you can handle the truth. And comment only if you think you already know how this ends. Because once you step inside the story, there's no turning back. The first alarm went off at 3:17 a.m., slicing through the silence of the Colorado Rockies like a blade. Inside ADX Florence, the prison designed for men the system has already given up on, alarms never went off by accident. When they did, it meant one thing. Control had slipped, even if only for a second. Correctional officers sprinted through concrete corridors built to swallow sound. Steel doors sealed automatically, one after another, locking nearly 400 of the most dangerous inmates in America into total isolation. Somewhere deep inside cell block D, a body lay motionless on the floor of a single-man cell. No witnesses, no cameras inside, no obvious weapon. And yet, everyone knew this wasn't suicide. ADX Florence wasn't supposed to have gangs. That was the myth. No shared cells, no group yard time, no whispers exchanged in hallways. But myths are comforts we tell ourselves when we don't want to look too closely. The truth was darker. The truth was that the most powerful prison gang in America didn't need meetings, tattoos, or hand signs. They communicated through silence. The dead man was inmate Daniel Mercer, federal prisoner #84821-019, former financial courier for a Midwestern crime syndicate, nonviolent on paper. Transferred to ADX 2 years earlier after a classified incident at a lower security facility. His file was sealed so tightly even most guards didn't know why he was there. But someone inside ADX knew exactly who Mercer was and why he needed to die. Special Agent Rebecca Hale arrived before sunrise. FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. 15 years of chasing organized crime, 7 of them studying criminal networks that thrived under pressure. When she walked into the prison, the temperature dropped, not from fear, but from recognition. ADX staff had requested her specifically. "This place doesn't have murders," the warden said quietly as they stood outside Mercer's cell. "It has problems. This feels different." Hale crouched near the body, careful not to cross the threshold. Mercer's eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling. No visible trauma. No blood. His bunk was untouched, sheets folded with military precision. On the small steel desk sat a paperback book, spine cracked exactly halfway through. "What's the cause of death?" Hale asked. "Still pending," the medical examiner replied. But initial signs point to poisoning. Hale's jaw tightened. Poison meant planning. Planning meant access. And access inside ADX Florence was a currency more valuable than money. She noticed something else. Scratched faintly into the concrete wall near the sink, so lightly it could have been missed, were 3 letters. V, I, and X. Roman numerals. 6. ADX staff dismissed it as inmate boredom, but Hale didn't. In her experience, symbols inside high-security prisons were never random. They were messages meant for someone who knew how to read them. As the investigation unfolded, more anomalies surfaced. 2 guards reported malfunctioning door sensors during the night shift. Brief outages lasting less than 10 seconds. Not long enough to trigger an alert. Long enough to move something small. Or pass something invisible. Then there was the book. Mercer had checked it out from the prison library 2 weeks earlier. A dry, forgettable history of the Roman Empire. But when Hale flipped through it, she found the pages subtly marked. Creases, pressure points, barely visible dots near specific paragraphs. Cross-referenced, they spelled out coordinates. Not places. Cells. 6 of them. Hale felt the weight settle in her chest. Someone inside ADX wasn't just killing. They were organizing. Mapping influence across total isolation. Building a network without ever being seen together. The myth of the gangless prison was collapsing. When Hale requested the files of the 6 inmates connected to the coordinates, the response came back delayed. Redacted. Classified. 3 of the names were familiar. Men tied to extremist groups, international cartels, and domestic terror networks. Rivals on the outside. Enemies by ideology. Inside ADX, they shared something else. All 6 had been transferred within the same 6-month window. All 6 had interacted with Mercer indirectly. through legal mail, library requests, or medical schedules. And all 6 had one thing in common. They had nothing left to lose. That evening, as Hale prepared to leave the facility, an officer approached her, pale and shaking. "Agent Hale," he said, lowering his voice, "there's something you need to see. We didn't think it mattered before." They led her to a secured storage room where confiscated inmate property was kept. Inside a sealed evidence bag was a single, folded sheet of paper found hidden inside Mercer's mattress during a second search. No words, no drawings, just a list of names. 5 of them were crossed out. 1 was not, and written next to that final name, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a message that turned Hale's blood cold. Next transfer completes the circle. But when Hale looked up the remaining name in the system, her breath caught. The inmate wasn't scheduled for release. He was scheduled for arrival, and he would be transferred into ADX Florence in less than 48 hours. The circle tightens. The transfer bus arrived at ADX Florence just after dawn. Its tires
We know you were
crunching
there
on
that
gravel
night.
that had never
That's
known
not
escape.
true. You can't
Frost
prove
clung to
anything.
the razor wire, turning the perimeter into a crown of glass. Special Agent Rebecca Hale stood behind reinforced glass as the gates opened, her eyes fixed on the solitary figure stepping down from the bus in shackles. Inmate Marcus Vale. On paper, Vale was a former communications engineer turned cybercrime facilitator. He never pulled a trigger, never ordered a hit, yet his name appeared in sealed indictments tied to organized crime networks across 3 continents. He specialized in one thing: making people who should never be able to speak find a way to communicate. Vale was the missing name on Mercer's list. ADX procedures were flawless, but Hale watched anyway. Strip search, medical clearance, photographs. Every movement was logged, timed, audited. Vale didn't resist. He didn't speak. He smiled once, briefly, when the steel door closed behind him. That smile bothered Hale more than any threat ever could. Within hours of Vale's arrival, the prison's internal rhythm shifted. Guards reported subtle changes, routine requests filed at unusual times, inmates refusing meals they'd eaten for years, medical complaints spiking in cell block D. Nothing that violated protocol. Everything that suggested coordination. Hale met with a warden and senior staff in a room with no windows and walls thick enough to stop sound. She laid the evidence out carefully. Mercer's death, the Roman numerals, the marked book, the 6 coordinated cells, and Vale's arrival completing the circle. "This isn't a gang in the traditional sense," Hale said. "It's a command structure. 6 nodes. 1 purpose." "To do what?" the warden asked. Hale paused. "Control. Inside and outside these walls." The warden shook his head. "That's impossible here." "Nothing's impossible," Hale replied, "when patience is the weapon." That afternoon, the medical examiner confirmed Mercer's cause of death: digoxin poisoning, a heart medication lethal in precise doses, undetectable without targeted testing. The drug had entered Mercer's system slowly, over days, administered deliberately. Who has access to meds? Hale asked. "Medical staff," the warden said, "and inmates indirectly, if they know how." Vale knew how. Hale requested an immediate isolation order for Vale. No library access, no commissary, no legal mail. The request was denied. Vale's attorney had already filed a motion citing procedural violations during transfer. Someone on the outside was watching closely. Too closely. Then the first piece of evidence vanished. The book from Mercer's cell, log, bag, secured, was missing from evidence storage. Surveillance showed a power flicker at 2:04 a.m. Cameras went dark for 9 seconds. When they came back online, the shelf was empty. 9 seconds was becoming a pattern. Hale reviewed staff rosters for the night. 1 guard stood out, Officer Ben Carter. Clean record. Former military police. Recently transferred to ADX after a family medical emergency. He'd been on duty during Mercer's death, the evidence room outage, and Vale's intake. Hale requested an interview. Carter sat stiffly in the interrogation room, hands folded, eyes steady. He answered every question calmly. Too calmly. When Hale asked about the outages, he shrugged. Old systems, he said. This place runs on concrete and hope. Hale slid a photograph across the table. A still frame captured during the evidence room outage. Grainy, blurred, but clear enough. A gloved hand reaching for the shelf. That your glove? Hale asked. Carter stared at the photo. For the first time, his composure cracked. Not fear. Resignation. I didn't kill anyone, he said quietly. I know, Hale replied. But you helped. Carter swallowed. They said they'd hurt my sister. Hale felt a familiar burn of anger. The gang didn't need to threaten guards directly. They reached outward, beyond the walls, finding pressure points in the real world. Who's they? Hale asked. Carter shook his head. I never saw them. I never spoke to them. Instructions came through maintenance logs, schedule changes, things that looked normal unless you knew to read them differently. Vale's specialty. As Carter was escorted out, alarms blared again, this time from cell block C. An inmate had collapsed during recreation. Non-responsive. No visible injuries. Hale arrived as medics worked frantically. The inmate survived, barely. Toxicology later revealed trace amounts of digoxin. Non-lethal, but intentional. A message. They weren't hiding anymore. That night, Hale received an encrypted email on a secure FBI terminal. No sender. No traceable route. Just a single line of text. You can stop chasing shadows, Agent Hale. The circle already exists. Attached was a document. Internal ADX schematics, with staff access point highlighted. And one final note that made Hale's pulse hammer. Mercer was only the proof. As Hale stared at the screen, a guard burst into the room. Agent, he said breathless, you need to come now. They rushed toward cell block D, toward Vale's cell. As they approached, Hale noticed something chillingly wrong. The corridor was silent, too silent. When the steel door finally slid open, the cell was empty. No inmate, no forced entry. Just 6 Roman numerals etched deep into the concrete wall, no longer faint. And beneath them, written in fresh scratches, we're done waiting. Control without chains. ADX Florence went into full lockdown. Every corridor sealed. Every inmate accounted for, except one. Marcus Vale had vanished from the most secure prison in the United States without triggering a single alarm that mattered. No broken doors. No injured guards. Just absence, like a missing word in a sentence that no longer made sense. Special Agent Rebecca Hale stood in Vale's empty cell, staring at the wall where the Roman numerals had been carved deep enough to scar the concrete. 6. The circle. Complete. People don't disappear from ADX, the warden said behind her. His voice carried a tremor he couldn't hide. They're buried in paperwork before they're buried anywhere else. Hale knelt and examined the floor drain. The screws were intact, untouched. No tunnels. No disguises. No miracles. Vale hadn't escaped like a man running from prison. He'd been removed. The truth landed slowly, painfully. Vale was never meant to stay. Mercer hadn't been silenced to hide a secret. He'd been killed to announce one. Hale ordered a full review of every system update, contractor visit, and supply delivery from the past year. What came back painted a picture more terrifying than violence. Patience. Private companies handling maintenance. Third-party medical suppliers. Rotating federal oversight committees. Tiny access points spread across bureaucracy, not bars. ADX Florence wasn't breached. It had been integrated. The 6 inmates, the circle, weren't leaders barking orders. They were anchors, fixed points through which information flowed outward. Mercer had been the test case. Could someone die in total isolation and still send a message? Yes. The poisoned inmate in cell block. He recovered enough to speak 2 days later, under heavy guard. He whispered a single sentence before requesting a lawyer. They don't need us alive, he said. Just placed. That same afternoon, Officer Ben Carter was found dead in his home. The official report said suicide. No note, no forced entry. Hale stood in the doorway as local police worked the scene. Something was wrong. Carter's phone was missing. 3 hours later, Hale got a call from FBI Cyber Division. Multiple federal servers have been accessed using credentials traced back to a deceased corrections officer. Classified inmate transfer schedules. Witness protection rosters. Pending indictments. Vale wasn't running a gang. He was running logistics. Hale pushed for a nationwide alert. Freeze transfers. Lock down sensitive cases. The response came back fractured. Jurisdictional disputes, legal challenges, deniability. The system moved slower than the threat. Then the first body outside ADX was found. A man in Kansas City. Former associate of Mercer's old syndicate. Cause of death, heart failure. Digoxin in his system. Same signature. Same precision. The circle had expanded. Hale finally understood the genius of it. No hierarchy to dismantle. No leader to capture. Each member knew only enough to play their role. Remove one, another took his place. The prison wasn't the headquarters. It was a firewall. 3 weeks later, a sealed indictment landed on Hale's desk. Marcus Vale's name wasn't on it. Neither were the names of the other 5 inmates. Instead, it targeted shell companies, contractors, intermediaries, people who had never committed a violent crime themselves. The cases stalled. Evidence vanished. Witnesses recanted. Quietly, without announcement, 2 of the original 6 inmates died of natural causes. Another was transferred overseas. One disappeared into protective custody under a new name. The circle didn't collapse. It adapted. Hale resigned from the FBI 6 months later. Official reason, burnout. Unofficially, she knew the truth had a shelf life the system couldn't afford. She began consulting quietly, tracking patterns most people couldn't see. On a cold morning in December, Hale received a package with no return address. Inside was a paperback book, the same Roman history Mercer had once held. Marked pages, familiar creases, a message, 6 new coordinates, 6 new cells, different prisons, different states. The final page held a note written in careful, almost respectful handwriting. ADX was only the proof of concept. Hale closed the book, her reflection staring back at her in the darkened window. Somewhere, men who would never meet were already listening to each other through silence. The most secure prison in the world hadn't failed. It had been studied and perfected. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Stay close. Watch carefully. And don't forget, control doesn't always come with chains.